God's name is that?
In the heart of the Siberian Far East, the White Death isn't just a myth. It's a blizzard that can freeze a person solid in minutes. 80-year-old Anastasia Petrovna has survived these woods alone for decades, living in a cabin that's more fortress than home. She thought she'd seen everything the taiga could throw at her. But as the wind howls at minus 70 degrees, a sound rattles her windows that shouldn't be there. It's a deep, chest-vibrating roar. Anastasia looks out her frosted glass and freezes. Standing on her porch is a 500-pound Siberian tiger, the apex predator of the north. But the tiger isn't there to hunt. Dropped at Anastasia's doorstep is a limp, shivering cub, its leg bent at an impossible angle. In a world where wild animals flee from humans, this queen of the forest has done the unthinkable. She has brought her dying child to the only soul she trusts. As Anastasia reaches for the door handle, she realizes this isn't a random encounter. It's a debt being repaid from 23 years ago. The door creaks open, the blizzard rushes in, and a choice is made that will bridge the gap between human and beast. This is a story of a kindness that refused to freeze. Would you risk your life for the cub of a wild tiger? Let me know in the comments. And if stories like this move you, make sure you like the video, because this one only gets more unbelievable. In the endless white expanse of the Siberian taiga, where the Ushuri River cuts through ancient forests like a silver scar, there stood a weathered log cabin that seemed to defy time itself. Its walls, darkened by decades of harsh winters, bore the marks of countless storms, and smoke rose steadily from its stone chimney even on the coldest days. Inside lived Anastasia Petrovna, an 80-year-old woman whose lined face told stories of survival that few could imagine. This was not Yakutia, but the Primorsky Krai region of far eastern Russia, a place where the taiga met the tundra, where temperatures could plummet to minus 70 degrees Celsius, and where the legendary Siberian tiger still roamed free. Anastasia had chosen this isolation deliberately. Decades ago, after her husband passed away, she had grown up in these forests, knew every birch and pine, every frozen stream and hidden valley. The solitude didn't frighten her. It was a chaos of crowded cities, with their noise and haste, that she could no longer bear. Her days followed a rhythm as old as the forest itself. She woke before dawn, fed the fire, melted snow for water, and prepared her simple meals from stores she'd gathered during the brief summer months. Dried mushrooms, preserved berries, smoked fish from the river, and flour for bread. These were her sustenance. Twice a year, a supply helicopter would land in the clearing near her cabin, bringing essentials she couldn't produce herself: tea, salt, medicine, and fuel for her small generator. The pilot would ask if she wanted to leave, to spend her final years in comfort somewhere warm. She always refused. On this particular February morning, the world outside had transformed into a maelstrom of white fury. A blizzard had descended overnight with ferocious intensity, the kind that old-timers called the White Death. Snow didn't fall so much as it attacked horizontally, driven by winds that howled like tormented spirits. Anastasia had seen such storms before. She knew the protocol. Stay inside, keep the fire burning, wait it out. The walls of her cabin were thick, built by her grandfather's hands nearly a century ago. They had weathered worse. She was kneading dough for bread, her gnarled fingers working the mixture with practiced efficiency, when she heard it, a sound that cut through even the screaming wind, a deep, resonant call that made the windows rattle in their frames. Anastasia froze. She knew that sound, every fiber of her being, every instinct honed by 8 decades in these woods, recognized it instantly. A tiger. Her heart hammered in her chest as
What in God's name is that?
she moved slowly toward the window, wiping condensation from the cold glass with her sleeve. What she saw made her breath catch in her throat. Through the swirling white chaos, a shape emerged, massive, powerful, moving with deliberate purpose through snow that would stop any other creature. The Siberian tiger was the largest cat on Earth, and this one was a female, her orange and black stripes stark against the pale landscape. But it wasn't the tiger's size that made Anastasia's hands tremble as they gripped the windowsill. It was what the tiger carried in her jaws. A cub, small, limp, its tiny body dangling helplessly as the mother tiger approached the cabin with slow, careful steps. The cub wasn't moving. Anastasia watched transfixed as the great cat reached her doorstep. The tiger gently lowered the cub onto the worn wooden boards, then lifted her enormous head. For a long moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, the tiger's golden eyes met Anastasia's through the window. There was something in that gaze, not the blank stare of a wild predator, but something deeper, something that looked almost like recognition. The tiger made that deep, rumbling call again, then backed away a few steps. She sat in the snow, her massive frame patient and still, and waited. Anastasia's mind raced. This was impossible. Tigers were solitary, fiercely protective of their young. They didn't approach human dwellings. They didn't ask for help. And yet, here was this magnificent creature, clearly seeking exactly that. The cub on her doorstep wasn't moving. And even from inside, Anastasia could see it was in distress. Her hands shook as she unbolted the heavy door. The blast of cold air that hit her was like a physical blow, stealing the breath from her lungs. She grabbed her heavy coat from its hook, wrapped herself quickly, and stepped outside. The tiger didn't move. She watched as Anastasia approached the cub, her eyes tracking every movement but showing no aggression. The old woman knelt beside the small, striped body, her joints protesting the cold and the sudden motion. The cub was breathing, but barely. Its body was cold to the touch, too cold, and it was shivering violently. One of its hind legs was swollen, the paw bent at an unnatural angle. Anastasia looked up at the mother tiger. "I understand," she whispered in Russian, her voice nearly lost in the wind. "I'll help." With more strength than her age frame suggested she possessed, Anastasia scooped the cub into her arms and carried it inside. The tiger rose to her feet, but made no move to follow. She simply watched as the door closed, then settled back into the snow, taking up a position near the cabin where she could see the entrance. There she would wait. Inside, Anastasia worked with the focused intensity of someone who had treated countless injuries over the years. Her own, her late husband's, and those of the few forest creatures she'd been able to help. She laid the cub on a blanket near the fire, examining it carefully. The cub was perhaps 3 months old, still spotted and striped in the manner of tiger young. Its breathing was shallow, and hypothermia had clearly set in, but it was the leg that concerned her most. A fracture, definitely, probably from a fall. She warmed water on her stove, prepared warm broth from her precious stores of dried meat, and wrapped the cub in every spare blanket she owned. Slowly, carefully, she dripped warm liquid into its mouth. The cub's tongue moved weakly. It was fighting to live. Hours passed. Anastasia splinted the small leg as best she could, using skills her grandmother had taught her generations ago. She massaged the cub's cold limbs to encourage circulation. She kept the fire roaring, sacrificing fuel she would normally conserve. And gradually, miraculously, the tiny creature began to respond. Its breathing deepened. Its shivers became less violent. And finally, as evening approached, it opened its eyes and looked at her. Anastasia felt tears on her cheeks, though she couldn't remember starting to cry. She went to the window. The tiger was still there, a sentinel in the snow. The blizzard had begun to ease, and in the gray twilight, their eyes met again. Anastasia nodded, and she could have sworn the great cat understood. That night, with the cub sleeping peacefully by the fire, Anastasia sat in her chair and let her mind drift back through the decades. There was something about this tiger, something familiar in those golden eyes. And then, like lightning splitting the darkness, the memory struck her. 23 years ago. She hadn't been alone then. Her husband Dmitri had still been alive, and they had lived together in this cabin, content in their isolation. It had been spring, the season when the forest came alive after the long death of winter. They had been checking their fish traps along the river when they heard it. The high-pitched, desperate crying of a young animal in distress. They found her trapped in an abandoned hunter's snare, barely old enough to be away from her mother, her paw caught in the cruel wire. A tiger cub, already showing the magnificent markings that would one day make her the empress of these forests. She'd been fighting the snare so desperately that the wire had cut deep into her flesh, and blood stained the ground around her. Most people would have run, or worse, would have killed the cub before its mother appeared. But Anastasia and Dmitri were not most people. Moving carefully, speaking in low, soothing tones, they had approached the terrified cub. It had taken nearly an hour, but finally they had cut the wire and freed her. Dmitri had cleaned the wound while Anastasia held the struggling animal, and then they had released her. The cub had bounded away into the forest without looking back. They had never seen her again. Until now, Anastasia looked at the small, sleeping cub by her fire, then out at the patient mother in the snow. "You remembered," she whispered. "After all these years, you remembered." For 3 days, the tiger waited outside while Anastasia cared for the cub within. She fed it, kept it warm, changed its splint, and spoke to it in soft tones that seemed to calm its fears. The cub grew stronger each day, its eyes brighter, its movements more vigorous. And each morning and evening, Anastasia would open the door and show the mother that her baby was alive and healing. On the 4th day, the cub tried to stand on its injured leg. It stumbled, but it was trying. Anastasia knew it was time. She wrapped the cub in a blanket, carried it to the door, and stepped outside. The tiger rose immediately, her attention completely focused on her baby. Anastasia walked slowly forward, knelt in the snow, and gently set the cub down on the ground. For a moment, nothing moved. Then the cub took a wobbly step toward its mother, and then another. The tiger bent her head, touching her nose to her baby's, making soft chuffing sounds of greeting and relief. The cub mewed and pressed against her. Then the mother tiger lifted her head and looked at Anastasia. The old woman met that gaze, and in it she saw everything: recognition, memory, and gratitude that transcended the boundary between species. The tiger picked up her cub, this time by the scruff of its neck as mothers do, and turned to leave. But after a few steps, she paused and looked back one final time. Anastasia raised her hand in a small wave. "Go well," she said. "Both of you." The tiger and her cub disappeared into the trees. And Anastasia was alone once more. But the cabin no longer felt empty. It felt blessed. That night, as she sat by her fire, Anastasia thought about the strange circles that life creates, the way kindness can echo across decades and return when least expected. In this frozen wilderness, where survival was a daily battle and death was always one mistake away, she had been reminded of something essential: that compassion creates bonds that endure beyond reason, beyond time, beyond even the vast differences between species. She had saved a tiger once, and that tiger had remembered and had trusted her with the most precious thing in the world, her child's life. In the coldest place on earth, Anastasia had witnessed the warmth that lives in the heart of the wild. If you enjoyed this story of survival and the unbreakable bonds of the wild, there are a few ways you can help us keep the fire burning in the taiga. Subscribe to join our community of explorers and never miss a journey into the heart of the wilderness. Like this video if Anastasia's courage inspired you today. It helps more people find this story. Comment below. Do you believe animals can truly remember a kindness for 20 years? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that even in the coldest places, compassion survives. Tap the notification bell so you're the first to know when our next story drops. Thanks for watching.